Welcome to Business Class. I'm Steve Ekstrom from Learn Tourism, a nonprofit academy dedicated to advancing the tourism industry through innovative training and sustainable practices. Our mission? To empower travel professionals and communities with the knowledge they need to create meaningful, authentic, and sustainable tourism experiences. Ready to join us on this journey? Visit learntourism.org and start making a difference today. Steve Ekstrom here, host of the Business Class podcast. Today's guest is a friend in the industry, somebody who I respect and who is wearing some delightful flannel befitting his role as CEO of Tourism Prince George, Colin Carson.
Yeah, thanks so much, Stephen. I think there's two different types of Canadian tuxedos. There's the full jean jacket with jeans, the denim on denim, or it's the plaid shirt. So I opted for my secondary Canadian tuxedo today.
What's nice is that you've actually embroidered your logo on the plaid shirt. This is a good step in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a fun play on ourselves, honestly, as the destination here in Canada. But yeah, we embrace the plaid, but of course, got to get our little Tourism Prince George logo in there as well.
So how did you end up working for a destination organization?
Yeah, an interesting story is like a lot of people, I think, fall into the tourism world on occasion, but I always had a passion for traveling. After university, I have a degree in marketing, so definitely the marketing passion was there all along. But after university, it provided a really cool opportunity to head overseas and spend some time in Denmark playing semi-professional volleyball there, actually. And really that year fell in love with traveling, was able to spend a lot of time traveling around Europe. Our holiday break, my girlfriend at the time and wife now spent some time in Czech Republic and Austria. And then really an awesome year there, being basically a tourist, but having a home base in Denmark. Funnily enough, the following year, my wife was presented an opportunity to go to China for the year. So we're like, great, let's do it. So went from Canada to Denmark to China in 3 consecutive years. Same experience again, unbelievable experience in both countries, completely different, but really got the travel bug, really found passion for the industry and seeing both sides of it there as a traveler, as a tourist, but really just falling in love with everything to do with travel. So when we moved back to Canada, spent a little bit of time working some different jobs and found myself applying for a role at Tourism Prince George about a year after returning to Canada, and been with the organization for 7 years now. Been kind of a funny way to fall into the industry, but really enjoy it and really passionate about it.
What's one thing you think all travelers have in common?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And maybe if I had the answer, then we'd be a lot better at our jobs of attracting visitors. But no, I think it's like really what I think is really that curiosity. That's what I like to see in travelers. And not all travelers have that. I think those are the best types of visitors to your destination. Those ones that are curious. They want to learn about the local culture. In our area in Canada, in Prince George, the Clayton First Nation, our local Indigenous community, their roots go back on this land for over 9,000 years. People that are curious about learning about that and traveling the right way and being stewards of the land, those are the best types of travelers, in my opinion. Even if you're not necessarily curious about certain things in a destination, if you're curious about other things or finding something to be curious about, that's probably the thing that ties a lot of travelers together.
You mentioned stewards. How do you see yourself as a steward for Prince George and the tourism community at large?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think that our role as an organization really hasn't been being a steward ourselves, but rather empowering and giving tools to our local First Nation to really allow them to make those decisions and allow them to promote the things that they want to promote, and share the things with visitors that they want to share. Because I think that's not our role as an organization. And I think that's an interesting shift that we found ourselves taking over the last number of years, and ensuring that relationship with our local First Nation is extremely strong so that we can allow them to be the stewards to their land that they've been on for over 9,000 years. It's our job to promote the destination as a whole, but we can't do that without telling their stories. And we want to make sure that we're telling those stories the way that they are meant to be told. So I think that in that sense, how we're stewards is really just trying to provide support to those people who I would consider the real stewards of the area.
One thing I admire about many of my Canadian friends is their commitment to sustainability. In what ways can a destination organization, promote and encourage sustainability within their community?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of tools that are somewhat readily available now, whether you're doing purchasing carbon credits and things of that nature for things that are happening. We're right now, we're looking at a responsible purchasing policy. We're a destination organization. We also run our visitor information center and have a gift shop as well. So that responsible purchasing policy that we're developing right now, we want to be buying things locally. We want to be making sure that the organizations that we're buying from, the companies we're supporting, are doing things ethically as well. So I think there's a lot of things that are in place, fortunately, right now that you can follow some different paths, become a bit more responsible as an organization. I will say the one really unique thing about Prince George specifically, I mentioned the Visitor Information Center that we operate. It's located inside our Conference and Civic Center. And the really cool thing about that is our Conference and Civic Center is part of this system called the Downtown Renewable Energy System. So all of the heating within this system in downtown, and it heats about 12 buildings in downtown Prince George, is actually heated from a sawmill and burnt residual waste from that sawmill. So it's a green kind of way that they're heating these buildings in downtown Prince George, and really a place that gets really cold and needs a lot of heat in the winter months. So we're very fortunate that our visitor center is able to be located in this space. And from that aspect, we're really proud that it's a relatively green way to heat the visitor center when it needs to be heated.
What's something you've learned that you wish you knew when you started?
Yeah, I think that what probably the biggest learning has just been like, don't be afraid to ask questions. There are so many amazing people in the industry. I think I spend a lot of time working within the tourism industry in British Columbia and in Canada. But the amount of people that over the years I've built friendships with and pick up the phone on a Friday afternoon and be like, hey, have you ever thought of something like this? Are you dealing with something like this? And being able to get answers from those people in a split second. And sometimes it's these massive destinations and it's so their CEO will pick the phone and be like, yeah, I got 10 minutes to chat. No worries. Feel free to pick my brain about this sort of stuff. And those types of relationships are unbelievable. And I think that thinking back to when I started in this role about 3 years ago, I think I really would have just asked more questions to these people because passion and the willingness to share is unbelievable. I think pretty common across the industry that people are just honestly really great people. So happy that we're able to continue to build those relationships. Now that I've been in my role a little bit of time, anytime someone picks up the phone and asks a question of me, I try to do my best to respond and help guide them through if I can, or give them the contact information of somebody who's better suited to help them in a lot of cases.
I would agree with you on that. I think people who work in tourism have an innate sense of curiosity, similar to the travelers that we deal with. I think one of my favorite quotes is Robert Heinlein, when one teaches, two learn. And I think that destination marketers and professionals in the business are more than happy to share what they've learned and learn from each other. I am humbled by the number of CEOs whose cell phone numbers I have, inadvertently waking up Adam Burke from Los Angeles at 6 o'clock in the morning. Things like that happen.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there for sure. And I think that curiosity piece and this always learning that at these conferences you go to, whether it's these Canadian specific ones that I tend to attend or the Destinations International Summits, you go to those and people want to learn, they want to be curious, they want to interact and see what other people are doing to grow their destinations and to grow themselves. And I think that's pretty powerful to see within the industry.
What do you think is the greatest misconception about your destination and British Columbia as a whole?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think that when people think of British Columbia, they think of Vancouver and Victoria primarily as those two major destinations. They are phenomenal destinations. I'm very fortunate to be able to spend quite a bit of time there. And anyone who gets the chance to travel there, I would highly recommend it. The interesting thing about our destination is we're about 1,000 kilometers away, about 500, 600 miles away from both of those destinations. So we are not really close. That being said, the access to get here from those destinations is quite simple. We have 6 flights daily to Vancouver, and it's about 55 minutes in the air. So it's one of those things where people have this preconception that we are isolated in the middle of nowhere and so far away from these destinations, where our air access is quite strong to get here. So I think That's the biggest misconception from our destination that we're constantly battling is people like, wow, it's so far to get to Prince George. And in reality, yeah, if you're coming from the East Coast or things like that, then you're going to have to connect flights and go through Vancouver and things like that. But we're 55 minutes away by flight from Vancouver. And like I said, 6 times a day, you can get up here at any time. I think that's one of the ones that we're always struggling. It's not that far. But then I think on the positive side, especially what we saw through the pandemic, I think people were craving that open space and kind of getting out of these crowds. That's something that we really do have to offer in our destination. So the stat we always like to showcase this is there's over 1,600 lakes, rivers, and creeks within a 100-kilometer radius of Prince George. So like access to water is there. You can drive for 5 minutes in any direction and find a hiking trail and find no real amounts of people around at these hiking trails because the population base is a little bit smaller here. And there's just so many that you're not going to run into that big kind of group of people unless you want to. So you can see these amazing things and do these amazing activities and often feel isolated while you're doing it. I think that's a pretty unique thing that we can offer. Some misconceptions there. And I say we're not that far away from things, but then at the same sentence, I say it is a like an isolated experience in a sense that you are out in nature, you are out on the land, and you can experience these things without massive crowds of people. So there's definitely a combination of both, and we like to think of it as that sweet spot. It's a city of 80,000 people, but you're in the middle of wilderness. You're in the middle of these amazing outdoor recreation activities that you can experience in no time.
How has your job changed over the last 7 years?
Yeah, enormously, obviously. I think that one of the things that's really interesting in our community, we are Prince George is a very heavy resource. A lot of forestry industry, a lot of pipeline activity, a lot of oil and gas, a lot of those types of heavier industries dominate our community. So I think that what we've seen that shift in the last 7 years is people are understanding that the tourism lens and the tourism industry not only provides that extra economic benefit of attracting people to the community, but for these residents that work in these other industries and anyone that lives here, it's an opportunity to really improve our community, have these amenities that are just fantastic for locals to experience. So I think that's the shift we've seen, and it's really positive that the local view on tourism has shifted from we're not a tourist destination to now understanding that, yeah, we have a lot of visitors here, whether or not they're here for traditional visitor experiences and like leisure travel, they are visitors to our community. We want to make sure that they have a good experience here because they are contributing financially to our economy. So shift has, I think, been really positive. And I think that what we're seeing with locals now is they want to see more tourists because they know that a great place to visit is a great place to live as well. So that extra benefit that we can pitch, as we see with a lot of these destination organizations throughout the world, and I think we're no different, really over the last 7 years, that shift from just a destination marketing organization to now playing a bigger role within talking to locals, that resident sentiment, supporting the creation of attractions, talking about being stewards of the land in the capacity that we can be. So that big shift has really gone along with this, is that evolving away from the traditional destination marketing organization and truly into this destination management or destination organization, however you want to classify us.
Before we dive back in, a quick word from our sponsor, Learn Tourism, the nonprofit academy, where we're dedicated to transforming the tourism industry with 4 key services: our cutting-edge learning experience platform, which offers robust analytics and seamless updates; our custom course development, which ensures tailored learning solutions; subject matter experts who provide deep insights and valuable knowledge; and of course, our engaging speakers who are here to inspire and educate with impactful presentations. Discover how we can elevate your tourism education at learntourism.org.
How do you go about teaching your community members to be advocates and ambassadors for your work and for tourism in general?
Yeah, that's a really tricky one, specifically in Prince George. I think this goes back that resource heavy sector that we've had as a community. But often local people are a little bit negative, and I think this is probably standard everywhere, but residents tend to not love the place they live, or at least outwardly speak that way. A lot of people negatively talking about their local community where they grew up because they don't understand that there are great things to do, and maybe they're not doing those things because they're used to seeing that every day or different things like that. But I think that shift for us to really trying to create these local ambassadors, and obviously we've got some great tools like the Tourism Academy program to try to get people trained in how to actually become a local ambassador. But I think that shift has been really valuable because it's trying to create that pride of place. It's trying to create so these individuals, these locals, these residents are proud of what they have and are encouraging people to come visit them. I think that's been a really interesting shift. How we go about that, I think we make a really big effort to be involved in a lot of events. And obviously the rationale behind that is if there's an events that visitors are attending, we want to be there and interacting with those visitors. But the other piece of that is when we talk about these celebrations, like recently we had National Indigenous Peoples Day in Canada here. We're coming up to Canada Day, our two big holidays there. We want to be at those celebrations, at those events, to interact with those visitors and make sure they're having a good visitor experience, but also to interact with our locals and understand the role that we play in the community and give them more tools to become ambassadors. I think that's been our strategy on that as we get to as many events as we can, whether that be a booth or just walking by, and maybe I'll try to attend with my wife and kids and still interact with these people, but really trying to focus on doing that so that we are creating these ambassadors.
You mentioned your family.
Is a very good question. I think that maybe this is more hopeful than how it actually is. My mother was probably the most dedicated parent I've ever seen. I mentioned I was a high-level volleyball player. The demands of travel and things like that for me as a kid growing up was huge. And she was number one at getting to practice on time and making sure we're still fed and making sure all these things. That is what I'm hoping that I can take away from my mom. And my dad on the other side, he owned and operated an electrical contracting business for close to 30 years here in Prince George. So that entrepreneurial spirit, that willingness to take risks and lead an organization, those are things that I still look to him for and still ask him questions about to this day. But hopefully those are things that I can take away and bring into my own life as well. I will say that they are two phenomenal parents to have. And the story I tell to really showcase this is when I was finishing my volleyball career at university and playing varsity volleyball, in my senior year, I played about 300 to 350, 400 miles away from our hometown and from where my parents lived at the time. And there was not a single game in my senior year where I didn't have at least one of my parents in the crowd. So that kind of dedication, I think, just to be there for me highlights it all for that relationship with them and knowing that they were supporting me in whatever I was doing, but especially in that, like, this is the last time we'll probably ever get to watch you play the sport that you love. Like, we're going to make sure that we're there all the time. So that was pretty special and pretty powerful for me.
So you have a fairly small team.
Yes.
How would you like your team to describe you?
Well, good question. No,
I can ask them instead. Like,
no, I guess funny story. Like recently we've had someone leave our team and on the best of terms, if I'm being honest, they were presented an opportunity they couldn't say no to. Sit down in an exit interview with them and I've got my standard questions on why are you leaving? What could we have done to keep you? Would you ever consider coming back? All those questions. And I hope this is true for the rest of the team as well. But I think that the comments I received from that employee that left were extremely positive. The vision that she saw and that I'm hoping that I'm portraying is that I think the standard kind of catchphrase is open door policy and making sure people are accessible. But that's something that I truly try to make sure that people are comfortable coming to me with any sorts of problems and making sure that they're involved in decisions that are being made at different levels and having the ability to make decisions themselves and know that they're going to be supported from me and making sure that I'll have their back on those types of things. I think comes down to is like really creating this environment where people want to take risks, because I think that's what we need to be doing as an organization to be successful, and making sure that they feel supported in taking those risks. Maybe I didn't fully answer that one because I don't want to get too detailed on what they actually think about me, but that's what we'll go with.
What's something I didn't ask, but you wish I did?
Hmm. That's a good question. I'm not too sure. I think that one of the interesting things we talked a little bit about the shift from in the last 7 years, the DMO and at the destination organization. I think what's really interesting is going to be what happens in the next 5 to 7 years. And I think that's something that we are seeing a lot of different destinations doing some really unique, really creative things, ensuring that their destinations are properly looked after going forward. And I think that's attracting the right types of travelers rather than these mass marketing campaigns. We saw in Florida over spring break, hey, we don't want you guys here for spring break if you're going to treat our beaches the way that you have done in previous years. Even communities like Barcelona taking serious looks at short-term rentals and how that impacts resident quality of life and how they want to be a tourist destination moving forward. So I think that's the big question that keeps me awake at night is what's our organization and what's our destination doing over the next 5 to 7 years to make sure we're staying relevant and to make sure we're being effective moving forward. So I think that's the really unique thing. Do I have an answer? Not really. But that's definitely the thing that keeps me awake at night more often than not, thinking about how as an organization we're still moving the needle and being progressive, but doing things effectively moving forward.
What's something you'd love to learn?
Ooh, lots of different things. Can I say I'd love to learn how to become a woodworker is probably one. Nothing
Sure.
through with them, but that's something super interesting to me. I'd love to be able to make things with my hands a little bit more, and I think that's a skill that I've never developed. Honestly, things like that blow me away. I think from the tourism lens, creating these authentic experiences that people want to see, I think that's part of where that comes from. We have some fantastic creators and makers and in Prince George that we're fortunate enough to be able to highlight at our visitor center and in some of these other locations that we can support. So I think when I see things like that, it gets me so excited and passionate about, really being able to tell the story of a destination through that lens of whether it's crafting, wood making, metalworking, whatever it could be. I think that's really cool and impactful.
What would you like to ask me?
That's a very good question. What advice would you have for a pretty isolated destination organization? How would you see a community like us growing when a lot of our weaknesses would be based on geography? So what would be some advice you would have for someone like that, where its geography is one of the things that is definitely holding us back a little bit?
Back to your earlier point, I think that's one of your advantages. I think that as people are looking for, I'm a full-time traveler. I'm in an RV. I woke up this morning not remembering where I was, and that's not an exaggeration. But as people seek out these authentic experiences, as people seek out these connections to community and people and culture and heritage and nature, destinations like yours really stand apart as being able to facilitate those connections, picking and choosing your visitors. There is a tremendous community of people who want to experience a smaller destination, who want to enjoy hiking and nature and lakes and rivers. And they want to enjoy all these things because they're pristine and they want to be a part of maintaining that. And giving people the opportunity to experience it, but also to participate in it, I think is key to long-term success. Letting people know that a great part of your work is contributing to the indigenous people. It's contributing to the sustainability and the stewardship of the destination. And as you explain and you tell that story, you will attract visitors who share those values. And I think values-based tourism is going to be a greater part of our industry over the next 5 to 7 years. And I think you guys are great examples of that. There are few that really stand out as living their values and that dedication to exhibiting their values in the way that you guys do. So I have to give you credit for that.
Thank you. Yeah, we definitely tried to emulate that, but to hear that's great. Really appreciate that.
No problem.
I don't think so. That's a crash course on tourism Prince George.
If folks want to learn more or plan a visit to the destination, how would they go about doing so?
tourismpg.com. Kind of head over to our website. All the information you'll need there can be accessed. And of course, follow us on social media, all the classic social media channels at Tourism PG.
You are fantastic. I appreciate you. You and your team are great to work with, so we're thankful.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Stephen.
Thanks for tuning in to Business Class. This episode was brought to you by Learn Tourism, the nonprofit academy where we advance the tourism industry with cutting-edge training and sustainable practices. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to visit learntourism.org to learn more about our programs and how you can get involved. Until next time, stay curious, continue learning and making a difference through tourism.